Hello, Uta here. Good to see you. This is an unusual Winterfest variety iris, which decided to bloom in the fall instead of next spring. I've got three of them doing this. I think they're doing it because I had transplanted them to kind of a better spot, and because last spring they didn't bloom. So they're catching up, and they're just so special. And I'm giving them to my very good friend. Even the backside is pretty. I'm giving them to my very good friend when I head down. I'm going to be heading down, gosh, to see Clace again day after tomorrow, yes, and I'll be there for over 2 weeks. The other thing that's going on is I seem to be developing a cataract in one of my eyes. My vision is kind of blurry. So I imagine that this now routine surgery for that is ahead for me. And I have a very good set of people who will help me with that. Now, what I'm going to proudly relay to you is that Ashley McClure, who writes for Independent Women's Forum, a lobbying group for women's rights and especially for women's sports and things, women's issues right now, she did a profile of me for their organization and highlighted, my book and my channel, Trans Widow Utahagen, this channel, and my blog, utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. There's a new post up there regarding these girls in Maine having to deal with a male athlete, taking all the first places in their track meets. But this is in the National Review. Uta Hagen made it into the National Review in an opinion piece by Ashley McClure. The title is Silent. The title is Science Shouldn't Help Men Pretend to be Mothers. And it has to do with this idea breakthrough uterine transplant surgeries exist to help women, but should never be made available to men with, in quotes, womb envy. Now, yeah, I personally think that there are a lot of questions regarding even female to female uterine transplants and the fetuses in there, because there has to be quite a bit of ingestion of anti-rejection drugs and stuff like that. So for me, this is just a brave new world. But she goes into my story and the acknowledgement of womb envy, pregnancy envy, and mother envy that dudes have who ideate a female persona, especially when they are married and when they are the biological fathers of children. While on family vacation with her husband and two young sons, Uta Hagen of Brooklyn, New York, that's where I was then, discovered that her husband was leading a double life. Unbeknownst to her, he had been secretly cross-dressing and visiting gay bars in Greenwich Village for months. She later learned that his cross-dressing had started sometime during her second pregnancy. Over the next few years, during which her husband socially and medically transitioned, abandoning their family in the process. I'm sure he wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say that I abandoned them. He would accuse me of abandoning our marriage. That's what he did. He accused me of that, but he certainly abandoned his role as a father and husband. So Hagen came to believe that her husband's transition was inextricably linked to a fierce jealousy of her pregnancy. Today, Hagen calls herself a trans widow because the man she married has vanished forever, even though he's still alive. Now divorced, she has dedicated her life to interviewing and platforming other trans widows and has compiled an impressive amount of research on the subject. Over the course of 52 interviews, and actually that is now 54, Hagen heard her experience with womb envy validated again and again. This is a pattern for men who transition, in quotes, between ages 35 and 50 when their wife is pregnant, Hagen told Independent Women's Forum in an interview. They have this uncontrolled jealousy of the pregnancy, and actually, I believe they have a really strange false concept of what childbirth experience is. I think they have a false concept that childbirth is a sexual experience for the mother, and it's a miraculous experience. It's usually intensely painful and uh, uh, overwhelming, but we deal with it and we breathe and we know that we're trying to do our best for the new baby. Hagen's personal testimony comes in the wake of news that before long men may be able to co-opt not only women's closed sports and private spaces, but their uniquely female organs as well. In April of this year being 2023, The Guardian announced that United Kingdom's first womb transplant had resulted in a healthy birth for the mother and child. At first glance, this news seems overwhelmingly positive. Women suffering from Mayer-Rokitansky-Krister-Hauser MRKH syndrome, a rare condition where a baby girl is born without a uterus, now potentially has an alternative to surrogacy if they wish to have their own biological children. I personally think that's still very, very complicated. Predictably, however, activists are already attempting to hijack womb transplant surgeries to allow men who identify as women a chance to feel more feminine. I just think it's so interesting that pregnancy and childbirth, which take a great deal of strength and fortitude, are, the most feminine thing. Of course, it's a most miraculous and wonderful thing that a woman can do in her life. However, feminine. I wasn't thinking about being feminine when I was breathing through my contractions. While these breakthrough surgeries are just starting to be performed in the UK, the first ever successful birth from a womb transplant took place in Sweden in 2014. Mats Brännström, a professor and chief physician at the University of Gothenburg, who assisted at that birth, reported that after the surgery he received a barrage of emails from men who identify as transgender women hoping to get pregnant. Instead of reminding them of the biological reality that only women have the physical and hormonal makeup to gestate a child, Brännström told them, "We haven't done enough research, but I think it will be possible in the future. It may take 5 or 10 years. And where are these uteruses going to come from? Poor women in India, perhaps?" Even more shockingly, he asserted that if it's an efficient method with no risk, I don't think there are any ethical boundaries. Oh yes, I just mentioned the women that the uterus is, the woman that the uterus is going to come from. Consider the costs alone. The medical procedures currently available to men who seek to alter their sexual anatomy are extremely expensive and can affect their family's well-being in addition to their own. According to Hagen's research, 1/3 of the women she interviewed said that their male partner had secretly run up credit card debt to finance his efforts to appear as a woman. One woman revealed that her husband took $55,000 out of their shared retirement account to pay for facial feminization. At least he attempted to. I have to go back to that and find out if she somehow prevented him. But that's what he stated his intentions were. These expenses pale in comparison to the $300,000 price tag on uterine transplant surgeries, which are usually not covered by insurance. As devastating as the financial burdens can be, attempting to co-opt The uniquely feminine experience of pregnancy is where Hagen reports the real betrayal lies. One of the most disturbing discoveries she made was that some transitioning husbands take credit for their wives' birth experiences. Yes, like mine. According to Hagen, they do this to try to convince people of falsehoods that they are really women and that they actually give birth themselves. Their wives are left blindsided, expected not only to indulge this impossible notion, but to also share Mother's Day. Yes, the teachers start making the child create two Mother's Day presents. And even the title of mother with their husbands. Oh, yes, that's in blue states in the States. This is accepted law that the man can name himself the mother of the children, and I think it's actually obscured that he's actually the biological father. That men who identify as women seek to attain female organs in order to access the uniquely, she says feminine experience, I will say female experience of giving birth, betrays an almost incomprehensible level of narcissism. Seduced by the cult of gender ideology, they show a complete disregard for the women whose lives are ripped apart. According to the National Library of Medicine, these disordered desires are often linked to autogynephilia, a condition in which a man is sexually aroused by the thought of himself as female. The disorder is a common precursor in males undergoing procedures to alter their appearance or sex characteristics, in other words, sex trait modifications. In other words, these men claiming the rights to female organs and the birth experience, for them it is a sexual experience. Under these circumstances, imitation is not flattery, it's mockery. The news that men identifying as women are clamoring for uterine transplants at the expense of women who really need them is one more example of the chokehold that gender ideology has on the United States. In the last year, American women have been pressured to applaud, while the TikToker Mulvaney ridiculed the experience of girlhood and womanhood, suggesting that being a woman means crying, overspending, and wearing fluffy dresses. American women were forced to take a back seat while transgender identifying male Rachel Levine, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for Health, won USA Today's Woman of the Year award. And despite left-leaning voices trying to pressure us otherwise, women are being deprived of athletic opportunities and scholarships as transgender identifying athletes such as Leah/Will Thomas rack up win after win and title after title. Thankfully, this trend is receiving pushback because of the unflagging efforts of women such as former competitive swimmer Riley Gaines, brava, and their allies in several state governments, including the governors of Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Florida. The growing resistance to men participating in women's sports points to a future where men will no longer be able to access women's spaces and, hopefully, their body parts. Yes, and as a matter of fact, Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, just made an order that words, phrases such as vulva havers, cervix havers, non-men, and other silly terms that are supposed to mean women shall not be used in any kind of official state documents. Performing a uterine transplant on a biological man is not only a crime against natural law, it's a crime against the women who have had life-saving hysterectomies or are suffering from this MRKH syndrome and finally might have the chance to carry their own child. Women have lost their awards, their scholarships, and even the exclusive right to be called mothers. Women shouldn't have to compete with men for access to reproductive care, too. So, I have a few of these. Beautiful. It's called Winterfest. They're just so radiant, these irises. I hope they will bloom for me. In the spring. Now, after you've heard shocking things like this, do please go to the National Review and join their comments. They have 163 comments already. I haven't had time to see what they say. Because I have to go outside and plant more daffodils. So be well. Look at my wellness movements videos and keep yourself calm and centered.